Hello, welcome all to the second ever episode of Sunday Spotlight. How's that for alliteration? Today we're talking to the ever prolific, the hard-working, the hilarious Spedsy. You've probably seen him on Drink and Draw. You've probably seen him on the many comics he's managed to put out, of which I've managed to get some work in. Very pleased with that collaboration. With me, the fearless founder of ComX, Shane, aka The Sizzle. And off the top, quickly, happy birthday to Annette. I know you're probably watching. You love these things, and I know this will mean the world to you. Hope it's been a great day. I'll talk to you properly afterwards.
I just wanted to say I did not okay the happy birthday message. And Annette, you're taking up my time. So
It's my show. I respect you on the Drink and Draw.
Yeah, I'm changing my nickname from Spedsy to Oversaturated. I am everywhere.
That's good. You can never have too much.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got some quick fire questions here to get us loose and limber. Favorite color?
Black.
Day or night?
Night.
Favorite drink?
Mineral water.
What are you reading / collecting at the moment?
Independent Australian comics.
What's the last song you listened to?
Just Breathe by Pearl Jam.
Beautiful. Favorite and least favorite thing to draw?
Favorite is eyes. Least favorite is hands.
Hands are a bitch.
Especially these ones.
Okay, so before we dive into the meat of it, how about we show off some of Spedsy's style? So we're all on the same visual page.
Okay.
Yeah.
There he is. There's that guy.
Cover. Big fan of the coloring on that one.
Yeah.
A classic.
Devil's Toilet.
If you say you like indie comics but don't have Devil's Toilet, you're a hypocrite. No offense.
Agreed.
Yeah, more.
Vamoose.
Vamoose.
If you want,
This
again,
one,
if you're a fan of indie, if you want a wide
Spedsy
screen
wrote.
shot. Oh, I don't have that one. I guess I'm the hypocrite.
Oh, come on, Pete.
I've embarrassed myself and others.
Well, look, as a special, like they do on the Jay Leno show or whatever, when like they bring out a special jumper for the host, I'm going to send you a larrikin and just in the mail.
Oh, that worked out brilliantly.
Nice.
And Annette, if you're listening, I've got one for you as well. Happy birthday.
That will legit make her day.
Now stop soaking up my spotlight.
All right, man. So back to the beginning. Have you always been a creative dude? Have you always been creating?
Yes.
Okay, what's the origin of creating? So
No,
like the anti-league chalker.
yeah, I was. That was a joke because I was saying to someone how I feel like I'm an easy interview because you ask a question and then I talk for 12 minutes. So I was just sort of going seeing how it would go if I just yesed a question. It went as expected, really awkward, and I've totally set us off on the wrong foot.
Now we know.
For as long as I can recall, I have been creating. I would write stories in my exercise books at school. So you would have, a couple of pages of maths, flick the book upside down and go from the back page. And there would be a tale of a warrior who had a tree house and that's just a particular story that I remember. He was called the Skylander.
Ooh.
And he would fight off like mutant monkeys and stuff from his treehouse.
I used to rip out the middle 4 pages, in the book. So by the end of it, my exercise books would be razor thin.
Yeah.
It would have been smarter to go from the back.
Mm.
Because I lost a lot of good notes.
Someone ripped out the middle of my Crimson and Rascal #1 because it's only like 8 pages.
Really? It could be like a Spedsy destroyed variant.
No, I'm just joking. It was remember your first issue was that's inside baseball joke. So inside you didn't even get it.
That's bad.
And so I've always been drawing and writing, and shout out to James Rolfe, who in graphics is my earliest drawing memory. I had drawn something that I was particularly happy with, and he stole it off me as like a keepings off. And when I chased him, and when I finally got it back, it was all crinkled. And I moaned to the teacher about it. And the teacher's idea of rectifying it was to get James Rolfe to redraw it. And I'll draw it. And that's my earliest memory of I don't even know where I was going with this story. James Rolfe was not intended to be talked about, but shout out to Mr. Neeson, whose idea it was for James to redraw my assignment.
So it's almost the first time you wrote a script and collaborated with someone.
Yeah, against my will. Yeah.
So can you recall the first time you went from just creating for fun to developing your style, like a serious project where you really had to apply yourself?
Yes. I don't know where or how this idea came to me, but it was within the music genre. I was a musician story. Yeah. I was a songwriter, and I got it in my head that I could be a famous musician, I guess. And immediately I thought my band could make it. And so I applied my wares to music for 10 years. I don't know where that came from, because my dad was a musician, but only played like in sort of local. He wasn't like a fame-seeking whatever. And not so much that I was seeking fame, but I just wanted to play in front of large crowds, which I guess is, a fame thing. And then it wasn't until after that, when music kind of went away, I still thought I was meant to be using my creative side to pay the bills. And so I turned to comics and novels, both very lucrative genres. And that's where screenwriting was in there somewhere too. Just trying to make my brain pay the bills instead of manual.
Is there a big difference in how you approach a song versus a comic?
Yes and no. Songs come from noodling, and drawing comes from doodling. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Write that one down.
Yeah. So songs would normally come from just strumming and humming. I am all kind of rhyming. And comics, for me at least in the beginning, would come from scribbling, just drawing shapes, pictures. Mainly I would start with eyes and see what happened. And then if something sort of particularly grabbed me, then I would start thinking, well, what's this person up to? And why do they look like this? And what are they? And where do they come from? And that's where all my sort of original comic book ideas came from.
Was there a moment when you realized, I want to stick with comics, like I've got a knack for this?
Sort of. I have a tendency to spin too many plates, or like try to do too many things, and therefore nothing gets my full attention. And so I was still drawing and I put out 2 comics during actually a Devil's Toilet that I dare not speak about, but there is an early Devil's Toilet one that is problematic. Jokes that I thought were funny in my early 20s, not so much now. But so I quit my job to focus on music, but I was still trying other things at the same time. I was formulating ideas for screenplays, and I was making comic books. And so I regret that time in a way, because I feel like I should have dedicated. If I had quit my job to make music, I should have made it my every moment. I should have focused on it. And so having learned that lesson, when I got a little bit of momentum a couple of years ago when Devil's Toilet came out with Reverie, I've made a real concerned, noted effort to try and stay focused
Yeah, cool.
on one thing and take the opportunities while I can. And yeah.
And you definitely do that. I remember when you jumped onto Webtoon.
Yeah.
And thinking that's something I've got to aspire to. I was very impressed how you just threw yourself into it.
Yeah. So, well, so that was a product of necessity, I guess, writing for Tony Huddy, who specifically asked me to make his comic into a Webtoon, his script into a Webtoon comic. And I'd never done a Webtoon. And so I literally, in the space of a couple of hours, like just tried to do one. And it just goes against so many things we've taught ourselves for so long about left to right. And, and now we're, page transitions in a comic are no longer relevant. Now it's almost like panel transitions. And panels they all go down the page. And yeah, lots of learning process that I wouldn't say I've nailed it yet, but chapter 10 versus chapter 1, I think I've learned some tricks about how to make it work. Yeah.
That's definitely something I need to jump into.
You'd smash it. It would be a challenge for you, though, because you like to fit about 300 panels worth of panels onto a page.
Yeah,
so it would be
tricky.
Yeah, it'd be awesome to see your stuff like, no, Pete, one panel, and then scroll down, one panel. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
One extra.
Yeah.
Any formal training at all?
I have gone to several screenwriting courses when I thought that was my where to apply my wares. So I learned a lot about screenwriting there, obviously, as was the name of the course.
So.
Yeah. Which actually hindered me a little bit, because then I went on to tricky thing with writing a screenplay is that you have this thing that's not really like a product, and it relies on getting someone to read it, and not as in like getting someone to read your comic for fun, like getting the powers that be to read it. And I've always hated that part where you've got to chase down people to see your stuff and whatever.
Definitely.
So I went from screenwriting to novel writing, which I had dabbled in over the years, but I was like, I'm going to actually commit to, hundreds of pages here and thousands of words. But I wrote it in the present tense, so it was happening like you would write a screenplay. Like Dave is talking to Steve, not Dave talked to Steve.
Yeah.
And so I think it worked, but for that sort of community who's very used to books being one way, it was sort of like a bit of a, what? And I'm like, the book's just happening. It's like watching a movie, but in words, like it's just happening now. But it was a stumbling block for many. Which, funnily enough, I've now got another novel that the first draft is done, and it's like 140,000 words. And I was working on that just as Gary Della said he would publish Devil's Toilet #1. And this is me trying to be disciplined, and I'm like, all right, well, I'll put the book aside for someday down the road, and I'm going to try and focus on one thing. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So, if you had to, how would you define a creative person? Would you say there's requirements?
No. My sister-in-law is more creative than I could ever hope to be. I think it's just a brain that thinks things that can take flights of fancy is a creative person. I like to do a thing called pre-dreaming, which is when you go to bed, and I'm trying to get my kids to, I think it helps with anxiety and stuff, is to pre-dream is you just take flights of fancy and imagine yourself you basically have a dream, but you think it while you're awake. This might sound ridiculous, but I think an ability to just imagine is, that's all right.
That's good. Good way to put it.
Like that. Flights of fancy, because I've noticed some people don't have that. that like you can just be talking, and sometimes your jokes will become hypothetical situations. And some people, I've joked around with mates of them, and I get how did you even think of that? And it's just where my brain goes. And I think, lots of us, obviously, we all sort of have that.
That's interesting. You put a name to something that I've done for years. So it's actually interesting.
Pre-dreaming?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's something if I can't sleep, that's something I'll do to myself. That's really interesting. I'm glad others do it, and it's not just me.
Well, I think it comes from just like, the old counting sheep. But when you're a creative person, you start picturing sheep jumping over a fence. But then one of them trips over and yells at the other one. And then there's suddenly this whole story of these sheep that some of them are scared to jump the fence. And and you're there and you're holding a lightsaber and you get over the damn fence, you sheep. And before you know it, you're pre-dreaming. And you've forgotten your day's worries. And
that's really cool.
Yeah.
So when you're absent-mindedly doodling or scribbling, you're on the phone or you're supposed to be working, what's the one thing you tend to draw more than others?
Thor's hammer.
Really?
Always. I'd start with I don't know what the term is, but like a cube, but a rectangle cube. So whatever that would be. 3D rectangle.
Rectangular prism.
Sure. So I always do that, and then I put a circle on top, then I put the handle on the bottom, and then the rope. The little thing that he puts around. I don't know why. I've just always done that. That's my go-to. I can't draw Thor to save my life. I can't draw wings on a hat, but I'll draw 1,000 little hammers.
So, what are your non-comic inspirations? I'm guessing you'd probably have a lot of musical ones.
Yeah, I love listening to music. I can't listen to music when I'm writing, which is one of the downsides, because I love having a big drawing task in front of me and putting on my favorite records or my favorite podcast has come out. So like writing wise, I have to listen to like a Lo-Fi Girl on YouTube, something that's just like some chilled beats, man.
Yeah. That you can sort of ignore.
Yeah. Just something to drown out. Like, it's sort of a product of necessity too, like having 6-year-old twins. My house is not ginormous. So I find myself, gone are the days where, like, I need complete silence when I write, and I need the sun to be in this parallax of, it's just like, no, I got to draw when I can draw. And write when I can write. But inspirations outside of comics, I'm a bit of a people watcher, studier. So I kind of get inspiration from that. I just thought of an awkward moment just last week where there was a lady standing. We were in a restaurant, and I was sitting with my wife, and over near the counter ordering was a lady. And I was looking at her for probably longer than I should have. And I even said to my wife, if that lady turned around, it'd be awkward because I've been staring at her for the last few minutes. But I was thinking about her as lines. Yeah. Like I was just looking about like, oh yeah, that goes into, and then you go from there. Because, you're always looking for tricks about how does a butt connect to a leg and a leg connect to an ankle and
especially as a cartoonist, how do you break it down? How do you get those shapes basic each time?
Yeah, absolutely.
I had something there. I've completely lost it, so let's just move on.
Lines on a person at a restaurant.
Before that,
music, podcast, Lo-Fi Girl, sweet beats, man.
No, there was something. Yes. What you're saying about having a family nearby and needing to have some quiet, but not necessarily having that. I read Stephen King's book, his biography on writing tips. And he said as he was getting more and more successful, the one thing he sort of treated himself to was an enormous, beautiful mahogany study desk. And he said to this day he hasn't written a thing on it because he sat down and thought it's too quiet. So he still writes on a crappy little dinner tray in the lounge room surrounded by his kids.
Yeah.
Well, they were his kids.
Yeah, well, so like I identify with that because I'm sitting in my office right now, which was my office. Then COVID happened. My wife had to start working from home, so the room that was the office became my wife's, and so I do all my desk is in the lounge room, and we've since gone looking for houses to upgrade and whatever, and with the idea that I would get my own office, and I kind of don't want it. Like we're looking at these places and they have these studios out the back, and my wife's like, "Oh, you could have all this space," and I was like, "It's that thing about like a writer needs, the peace and quiet, whatever." Well, now I've become accustomed to. I'm sitting there amongst it, like my kids are playing video games right next to me, and so I get to do my alone stuff. Like it's quite lonely being a creator, but my family are bustling around me, and
That's
sometimes
quite hearing in a way.
So they're battling and bustling.
Yeah, that's quite sweet. That's a cool little progression.
Yeah.
So when you're creating a comic, are you quite strict with your structure? Do you do full script first, then drawing, or do you kind of is there some loose scribbles and then is there a lot of give and take there, or do you have a very strict kind of procedure?
Depends on the project. Well, I don't even know if it depends on the project. I think it depends on my brain at the time, because it's differed almost every single time. So how I used to do comics when I was a kid through to, my late 20s, when I wasn't really kind of like pursuing it so much as just having fun, I would tell the story. I would tell a story with almost no story. One of my favorite little mini comics that I have that I can't really show the world because it's probably a bit weird, but it's called Baghead, with the subtitle Blood Pool, and it's about this guy who kills this rogue gang of cats who have been terrorizing the neighborhood. But that had no script, no story even. I just started drawing stuff. And as a result, it was so much fun. And with Sluggish, which is probably my most recent comic, was me kind of getting back to that, but because I couldn't help myself, I had a loose sort of story in mind, that it's a guy getting up in the morning and going to work, and then his dealings with being at work. That was about the structure I had. But then there's things where I've written myself into a hole with other things, so that you really need to. So like Devil's Toilet 1, I'd set some things in motion, and I thought Devil's Toilet 2 was going to be my last comic ever. So I wanted to get a bunch of ideas in there just so that they were documented, but also tie up loose ends from the first one. And so that one ended up being quite heavily scripted. And because, too, I thought I had to obey a 22-page rule, which I've since just gone, that was just to save a couple of bucks on printing. Like, why am I so stringently trying to stick to that rule when other comics of mine maybe could have done with another page or two to kind of get...
Yeah, sure.
Get someone like Larrikin and Just that we showed before. I'm very, very proud of that. Pete Fairfax absolutely killed it. Characters created by Gary Della, and he gave me it's a time travel story, and just over the course of it, I need you to do this and this and this. And so I, that's a very fun sort of like a writing prompt. But I felt the need to get that done in 22 pages, and I kind of sacrificed maybe a little bit of time spent with the characters. Like I'm proud of it because I just think it could be like this much better had I sort of pushed for 24 pages or something instead of 22, and let some moments sit for a sec.
Yeah.
So we weren't like crying and then running straight into something else. It's like let a moment breathe, and
Yeah, I know what you mean. I encountered similar problems being stuck with 8 pages on Presents. I wish I could have had another one just for pacing.
Yeah.
Shane.
Yeah.
But you know, sometimes these things happen.
Well, yeah, it's funny.
do learn
We
from
just
them.
ran into this with we've got a comic book coming out called Ring Around the Rosie with myself, Lee Chalker, Ben Sullivan, and Ryan Vella, and that was an 8-page story for Noir, and so it's like panel 1, bang, you're hitting the ground running because we wanted to tell the biggest story we could in the smallest amount of time. But then we had so much fun. Let's do it again. And then, all right, let's do it. Let's end up doing 3 chapters. And same sort of thing. I think it works. I think it's a fun experiment. I think it but it zooms along when had we sat down to write the best Ring Around the Rosie story, it probably would have been over 3 issues, not so much 3 chapters in one book. But
yeah, it's always good to know the reader's going to savor it.
Yeah,
rather than zoom through it.
Yeah, but too, it's like sometimes the idea of then drawing another couple of pages, it's like that can be another 30 hours work you're talking about.
And it's hard to disassociate. Sometimes you think because you put in, say, a week's extra worth of work, because it doesn't feel fresh to you.
Yeah.
You sometimes worry, well, will the reader, will it translate? And sometimes it's hard to get that dissonance.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about your space. You got any must-have tools you use when you're creating? I know you're a digital guy.
Just this, mate. Just my brain.
The greatest.
No, I need my glove. If I don't have my glove, I feel weird. I have a little glove to stop me from sliding around too much. Or the opposite, not sliding around enough. I need my stuff. It feels weird sometimes to draw elsewhere. I can't draw on the couch as comfy as it. I've sat down on the couch to draw, and I'm like, oh, I've discovered the. And then realize, no, I can't do that. But no real tools. I'm a digital guy. Obviously, digital is fairly new, so I obviously wasn't. But for the longest time, I couldn't achieve what I saw in my mind. I can, if I can draw on an iPad, I can obviously draw on paper, but I can't get the end result that I can get on a. Yeah. So I my pencils are the same on a piece of paper or on an iPad, and I should have known this, but there are pencilers and there are inkers, and I'm just not in traditional way. I'm just not an inker. I just can't get the lines that I want.
Yeah, I'm
that
right
I
there.
Can get digitally. Yeah, and so I had thrown it in many times with drawing because just everyone was just so much better than me. I just couldn't achieve what I wanted. And then, I need to go kiss a man on the lips at the Apple store who I was buying a new laptop. And he said, what do you use it for? And I said, I've got a little tablet that I use to color my drawings in. He goes, have you ever tried drawing on an iPad? And I was like, oh, that's crazy talk. And then I did 2 little strokes, and I was like, holy moly. Yeah, and I owe that guy everything. He's come back. I've described the man, and no one has any recollection of a person like that working there. So he may have been a ghost.
Maybe you go back to the Apple store, and it'll just be a mysterious, dusty breeze.
Yeah.
That could be cool. We've touched on a lot already, so I'll just jump forward here on my little list.
I'll touch on you in a minute.
Do you find when you get hindered, we all have a creative block on occasion. How do you overcome your dry spells?
Man, I've got so many little tips and tricks that I would happily give anybody.
Please.
So some awesome ones. This is sort of like for when you've got a blank page and you don't know what to do, but it's like, just imagine 2 people. There's a person in a room, and then, Steve is standing in a room, Bill walks in, and then just have the characters both say hello to each other, and then go from there with the conversation. Just have, how are you? Good. and just keep going and don't stop, they will start arguing. And then you'll find out what they're arguing about. And you'll find out their relationship. And it'll all just start appearing. And before you know it, you accidentally got a story that you didn't know was even there. I think, too, sometimes we can sit and worry about an idea. Like sitting and just going, I'm just trying to think of like I did the Devil's Toilet. What's my next character? I need like a guy with an octopus for a head. And it's like, it doesn't need to be about some fancy plot, unique, whatever. At the end of the day, it's all about characters and you know, the best plot in the world doesn't mean anything if you don't care about the character.
Very true.
So a trick would be like just make up a form like that you can fill out. So say name, date of birth, place of origin, job, fears, goals, and just fill it out. And then as you get to things like fears, like first thing I wrote down was like scared of cats. That was just the first thing that came to me. And then you start thinking, well, why is he scared of cats? What happened? And then before you know it, you've just created a character. And I think for people like you and I who kind of maybe draw first to find a character, it can be a good exercise in sort of like have a fully fleshed character, not in a visual sense, but in a personality sense. And then, you know, not everything has to be a guy with an octopus for a head. It can just be a dude, or it can just be a lady walking around. Give her a fancy beanie that make her look different that way.
Beanies are always a good choice.
Yeah, like a nice grey beanie with badges on it. Suddenly you've got yourself a good-looking rooster.
Styling.
Yeah. Another cool trick for now, I think this could work for people like yourself and I, but like if you're writing a comic for a artist, just ask the artist. Thanks, Gaz. Ask the artist what they want to draw. You know, like I was talking to an artist about something just recently, and I said, well, what would you want to draw if we were to do something? And he was like, I love drawing horror stuff. I love like jungle scapes. Don't want to do buildings. I love monsters. And then so suddenly ideas are coming that I had that was enough of a writing prompt. Do you know what I mean? Like, all right, so I need a jungle setting, horror-ish vibes. There's a weird looking monster character. And then, you know, ding, ding, bing, bing, suddenly all these bits start popping up. So how that could work for you and I, Pete, we're doing our own stuff, is somehow try and separate yourself and saying, well, what would I want to draw for 22 pages? Well, I like drawing, you know, and then fill out the questionnaire yourself. And
that's definitely how I approach foes, because I don't like drawing people, but I like drawing monsters.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm going to do multiple pages of the same two characters, it's got to be fun to draw.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, so my story with how I came up with Sluggish was that the Devil's Toilet was a square with eyes, and then stupidly I filled out the cast with people, and people are a pain in the butt to draw, whereas the toilet's really easy. And so I was trying to just find something, and I came up with Herb, the slug dude. And then I was like, oh, wow, he looks sad. And I was like, he's a sluggish. Like it would be, you know, like it just starts.
Very cool.
I wasn't setting down to write about mental health. I just was like, I drew a dude that looked like this slug looking dude that was looking sad. And I was like, all right, and start typing. And
that is a happy accident, as Bob Ross will say.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So how do you describe your style to people?
Nick May versus the Simpsons.
Very cool.
Yeah, I don't know. Like Simpsons would be there's always the hardest thing with like in music. They would always say, "Oh, how would you describe your sound?" And it's just like it's so weird. I would just say like kind of like the Foo Fighters, like rock and
Yeah.
roll. I don't know. So I would say I'm cartoony. Yeah, I would say there's a definite Simpsons, Rick and Morty sort of a vibe. Like that's when having to, when you have to say like the most popular version of what you do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah, I would say, well, imagine like Nick May, Peter Wilson, and Alex Major, like all had this weird baby together. That's what my stuff looks like.
Now that's a comic waiting to happen.
Yeah. And
so
sorry, I was just
there you go.
my writing style. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Dave Dyer said to me, he goes, "You always need to say something with your books, don't you?" And I was like, "Oh, I guess I." But then I flipped it on Dave, and then I told him of all the things that he didn't realize he was saying in his books. So maybe that's just a story thing. I don't know.
It could be. Interesting observation, though.
Mm.
So over the years, what's the best criticism or encouragement you've ever gotten?
Oh, I hate to say Dave Dyer's name again, but
he is a staple in the industry.
Yeah, I want to give you a better. I mean, Nick May kind of going from a mentor to an equal was kind of the biggest sort of compliment the universe could give me.
Cool.
I kind of had that in music too. I had a friend who played in a band who was very obviously better than my band when we started. And then after a couple of years, we were playing shows together and we would headline or they would headline and whatever. And yeah, that's quite a unique sort of feeling to look up to someone and then be able to look sideways to someone. Is that the word? Like you're both like on the same level sort of thing. But otherwise, Dave Dye reached out about 6 months ago and said, "Hey, are you up for a video chat?" And I was like, "Yeah, what's this going to be about?" Like, I don't know why I thought maybe I've said the wrong thing on Drink and Draw and, whatever. But no, he had read Larrikin and Just and he wanted to ask me questions about it. And like he was complimentary, but at the same time he was like, "I don't know why this and what about this?" And I was just like, that was a perspective that like was very I don't even know how to describe it. Cut to, I said to him a week ago, "Dave, are you up for a video chat? I'm going to send you Ring Around the Rosie, and I want you to do to Ring Around the Rosie what you did to Larrikin and Just." And cut to, when someone's like in your circle, but like what's that thing they call a Venn diagram or whatever?
Yeah.
So me and Dave are hanging out in this bit, but then our circles there's a lot more circle, and I'd like to have a reader like Dave not trip up on things in my books. I mean, I'd like to theoretically, I'd like no one to trip up on it. But it's in terms of like, that sort of. Dave's just got a good eye for things.
He does.
So yeah, any criticism, good or bad, from Dave is good.
That's a good approach. I always try to get my non-comic reading friends to go over it.
Yeah.
Because they'll be the first to, especially things like bad lettering.
Yeah.
Or panel placement. If it trips them up, then you got to simplify, come back.
Kudos on having friends that, kudos for having friends, but kudos for having friends that care about your comics. That's good.
Well, they know I won't speak to them.
My friends sort of like, "Sorry, what are you doing now? What do we have to buy? Like, we came to all your shows 20 years ago. That was enough, wasn't it? What do you do? The books now? How much are they?" It's like,
they should be grateful. Grateful. Is there a comic or could be a song? Is there one particular one that you always go back to for a bit of a hit of motivation, for a bit of inspiration?
Yeah. Why the Last Man is probably how I want to write comics. I think the comics that I write and draw are quite different to the comics that I write and someone else draws. So in terms of the comics that I write and someone else draws, Why the Last Man is the sort of tone that I'm feel like I'm playing in, where it's like it's serious stakes, but it doesn't take itself super seriously either. It's easy, digestible, not heavy. Like you try to write the books that you want to read, and I can't write like Alan Moore, and I know yeah. But I also know it definitely wasn't popular when I was working in a comic shop. But I also don't. Alan Moore's work doesn't really speak to me. I understand that he's awesome and everybody loves him and whatever, but it's, different strokes for different folks. Just that's not my kind of comic book. So, and I think that's my fault. If everyone's saying it's good, I have a weird ADHD something or whatever. It's very heavy for me. Things like Watchmen and V for Vendetta and whatever. So I kind of like a Brian Wood, Brian K. Vaughan, all the Bryans, Brian Michael Bendis. Those are my guys. Funnily enough, I was in a cover band with my dad called the Bryans when I was about 19. So this might be a full circle weird thing.
It very well could be. Well, okay. I think that brings us towards the end of the show. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Sorry for not being... I should have been more talkative.
No, you took us perfectly to the 40-minute mark. You're fine.
Oh, it's a 40-minute show? Sweet. We nailed it.
Yeah, you absolutely killed it.
Okay.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Thank you for all your comments. Love them all. Thanks for your help, Sis. Spedsy, what have you got to plug?
Well, I'm in a book called Sizzle and Doug right now. That's my latest comic book. That sounds like I'm doing Sizzle a favor, but I am not, because I myself am very proud of it. It's a weird thing to be like, you can easily go, all right, so I've done a bunch of comics now, just having a handful of pages in this other thing's not a big deal. And then you realize, well, prior to this, even just like the idea of getting a piece of fan art in a comic was massive. And so I'm stoked that I still have, talk to me in 10 years, but right now, even just like having the slightest bit of something in someone's book is very, makes me very proud. And to be part of Sizzle and Doug, to be the cover artist and the intro, outro guy, very proud to be a part of it. I think it's a piece of Australian comic book history. That's available right now at the ComX Shop, ComX.shop. Otherwise, I do a bunch of books that can be found at psychojanitor.com. And then a few others that can be found at reverypublications.com. So you can grab the stuff that I write and draw, that's wacky good times, or over at Reverie is some more sort of like, my version of my Spedsy's Alan Moore. Alan less.
Okay, fantastic. And keep an eye out for the Foes Collected Edition Kickstarter that should be coming relatively soon.
Yeah.
Also in Sizzle and Doug. And you can check out a lot of my stuff, mostly written. And I work with the great Robbie Don in Vamooses 1 through to 4 when that's coming out.
Yeah, and so call out to anybody in the Australian comic book industry who can beat. Me and Pete have been in, or will be in by February or something, 11 comics together. Different, and not in sequential order, just all over different anthologies and whatever. So come at me, Tim McEwen, Gary Challoner. Who else has got an 11 comic partnership?
There's no beating this brand.
Yeah.
I'd like to end on a quote. It's something I'm trying to do in this show. So today's quote: "The time you enjoy wasting is not wasted time." And that's from Bertrand Russell. I picked him because he's the polar opposite of a comic maker. I think he's a mathematician. But still wise words.
Yep, and then just a quick a quote from Nick May. What is this in my ear? From Nick May.
Profound.
Thanks,
I think
everybody.
we can all take something from that.
Awesome.
So, I guess
Good.
my last words would be: don't
Yes.
forget to like and subscribe.
Oh yeah.
Subscribe.
Subscribe.
Double-
Yeah,
yeah,
Just
awesome.
subscribe twice. Thanks. I guess that's the show, is it,
That's
Pete?
it. Yeah,
That's it.
I'm happy
Well,
with
thank
that.
you very much, Rob. Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for watching.
Thanks, guys.
And see you all
Thanks,
next
everyone.
week. See ya.
See you next week.
This show is sponsored by the ComX Shop.